Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today it is another video in my 2023 NFL offseason prediction series. It's the Dallas Cowboys, America's team. Make sure to leave a thumbs up on this video. Leave your comment in the comment section about America's team, and subscribe if you haven't already. And I know I just kind of took the PP out of the Dallas Cowboys with America's team, but I am a Giants fan, but I do try to be fair in all these videos. I think I did a good job with the Washington Commanders. You guys can go back and watch that later and tell me whether or not I did, but I think I did a good job here with Dallas. I think I'm very fair with the Cowboys in my assessments with them, even though Mike McCarthy is a bit overrated as a head coach. I think he's simultaneously overrated and underrated because I think people either position him as like the greatest coach ever, or they're like Skip Bayless and they say he's like the worst coach ever. And I think that neither one of those things is true. I think he can be a top 12 head coach in the NFL. And I think if he surrounds himself with good position coaches and good coordinators, he can get that coaching staff into the top 10. I think that was true with Kellen Moore and Dan Quinn. Now it's just really Dan Quinn. I haven't really seen anything about who's replacing Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator. If they're replacing him at all, maybe Mike McCarthy and Dan Quinn are sort of running that show together. There's a lot of things they need to clean up, that's for sure, and that starts with the quarterback, Dak Prescott. You know, what they're going to do in free agency, what they're going to do with some of the offensive line questions that they have, how they're going to clean up the interior defensive line and the linebacker room to sort of help out with that rushing attack that was really detrimental to how their defense performed, especially down the stretch, and how they're going to do that with not a lot of cap room. But we will start by discussing all this structurally with the head coach. So we got Cowboy head coach Mike McCarthy, who is really looks like he's going to be the guy fully in control of the offense now going forward. It's really going to be the show of him and Dan Quinn with Kellen Moore gone. Dan Quinn leading that defense, him leading the offense. It'll be interesting to see what kind of protege they start building up within that system. They really do like doing that. They did it with Jason Garrett, and then they tried doing it with Kellen Moore. And, you know, Kellen Moore, of course, has moved on to the Chargers. But we look at some of these offensive ranks. They did a great job putting up points. The rush touchdowns were real good. They had a good 1-2 punch there, and that really helped with their red zone production, where they were first in the NFL in red zone touchdown percentage. They were fifth on third down. They were fourth in sacks, and those things really coincided with a lot of success. Where they really struggled on offense was Dak Prescott turning the ball over 75 billion times. It really is an outlier when you look at all these rankings. You know, they're top 10 in pretty much all these great categories, top 5 in some serious major ones there, but then you got that turnover thing, and that's what's really costing them games. And they're going to need to clean that up in this upcoming offseason, and Dak's going to have to be a big part of being a lot smarter with the football. Maybe that includes getting him some better weapons, some a little bit healthier with the weapons. Maybe that does include making sure that you bring back that running game that kept him so strong. Maybe that does include maybe providing a little bit more confidence on the offensive line despite what's happening. Maybe he was avoiding a lot of sacks by making some irresponsible throws. There's a lot of things that the Cowboys offense can still do in terms of how they scheme and how they team build to be able to help Dak Prescott get out of the basement there of being just a turnover machine. And if he can get into maybe that top 15 area for turnovers, that could be a real difference maker for the Cowboys, because when you go and you look at their defensive side of the ball, they are incredible there as well. They were great at forcing turnovers. They were tremendous with sacks. They got one of the best defensive players in the NFL in Micah Parsons. They really only struggled in giving up the rushing yards, but they weren't giving up rushing touchdowns. That's for sure. So their defense was stepping up in the running game in those red zone situations. See, they're 9th in red zone percentage. They were 9th in third down percentage, which is a good sign there. Those third and shorts, they were coming up big. Third and longs and third and mediums coming up big because of that pass rush. And you know, it's just about building consistency with that rush defense. If you can bring up that rush defense, if you can bring up that ranking on the yards, force the opponent to throw the ball more, then you can unleash DeMarcus Lawrence and Dorrance Armstrong and Micah Parsons. And then you got Trayvon Diggs, who's a gigantic ball hawk there, and hopefully he can continue to improve on not getting burnt like toast on a lot of these routes, to really cut down on those types of mistakes and really harness in what could be a Super Bowl winning defense. And then, you know, you get some compliments for that Trayvon Diggs on the other side as well. You get, maybe draft or free agency or just general player development at the cornerback position to help improve that, and then that'll really bring things together. And Dallas could then potentially be a 12-13 win team for the next couple of years moving forward and be a real threat to finally get back to not only winning in the playoffs, but getting to major playoff games. Now, the Cowboys are starting $7 million over the salary cap, but they got some room here to move around. I think I did a pretty decent job. I think Cowboy fans would be quite happy with some of these moves. And we'll start with, I'm going to go with the rumor that Tony Pollard is going to get kept. It's about a $10 million for the transition tag. And that transition tag, I think, if they want to re-sign, or it's a non-exclusive franchise tag, where if a team wants to sign him, they have to give up like 2 first-round picks or something. And I think that's a really safe tag because it's a lower cap hit to give to Tony Pollard, and I don't think anyone's going to be giving up 2 first-round picks to go and get Tony Pollard either. So I think that's a really safe move for them to make, and maybe kick that can down the road, work on some sort of extension, maybe work out something with Ezekiel Elliott to bring his cap number down, his guaranteed money down, his dead money down. They got Terrence Steele, who I put a second-round restricted free agency tender on, $4.3 million. I think that's pretty good. He's got some versatility as a swing tackle. Restructured Dak Prescott, $22.4 million in cap savings. That's a huge number. And then I traded Tyron Smith. I do think he does have some trade value. How much that trade value is I think up for question and up to what the market might dictate. But I could see a team, giving up a day 2, a couple day 3 picks. Unfortunately, Trent Williams sort of carries the flag for what that value is going to look like perhaps for that trade. So they may not get a lot for him, but I think it's a lot better for them to trade him than just cut him. And I think that's because you want to be able to get something for him that you can use immediately so you have a much smoother transition. And Tyler Smith can go in and play left tackle need be, or he can stay at the guard position. You can, in the first round, look into getting a offensive tackle as well. And I also cut Malik Hooker, $3.5 million in cap savings. You can look into maybe bringing him back after the draft when you've got a better idea of what your roster is going to look like, because he's an okay player. He's got some really good moments, and you maybe want to keep some of the guys on that defense that got significant playing time as much as possible, but you also have to account for where you need to start saving some money going into the draft in that first wave of free agency. And that leaves them with $15.5 million to spend in free agency in the draft, which isn't a lot. You freed up some of the money there. You are keeping Tony Pollard, so you're really keeping some key players in place, but they still have some needs they have to address. I think the wide receiver and the tight end position is certainly one of them. I think you have to figure out the interior offensive line at that other guard position, assuming Tyler Smith is your left tackle moving forward. And then you have to, again, worry about that, giving up those rush yards. You want to get a good, maybe a space-eating nose tackle for that interior defensive line, and keep replenishing that defensive back room to get some guys out there with Trayvon Diggs and help out Dan Quinn with some depth perhaps, and maybe get that diamond in the rough type of a player that you can develop into a star player on the back end. So I was looking at some of the free agency targets, and I saw a couple of cheap options, both by the name of Jordan. We'll start with Jordan Akins, tight end, $1.5 million cap hit. Come in there, be another part of that tight end rotation. Dalton Schultz really didn't show up on the franchise tag year the way that you would have hoped he would. So it's a little bit easier to walk away from him, I think, at this point, and sort of do tight end by committee there. And you got Jordan Phillips, a 340-pound guy who's a little bit more athletic than maybe what he presents. And I think you can get him cheap at a $2 million cap hit, and you might be able to get a 3-down interior defensive tackle out of this deal who you can play at that 1 technique or even at a 0 technique, who's going to eat up some space and open up some lanes for guys like Jabril Cox to make some plays at the linebacker position in the running attack. So filling some 2 decent roster spots, still got $12 million. That does open you up to look at some guys that are on your roster right now that are impending free agents that you might want to bring back at some cheaper deals. You're going to lose out on a couple of key guys. Again, I think it's Anthony Brown, Jordan Lewis, You won't be able to afford to bring them back. They're probably going to be making $7 million or so. And then I think the draft strategy is pretty straightforward for the Dallas Cowboys. Get day one starters. You're very capable of doing so, given the way the draft is set up. I think this draft is set up for a lot of the better teams in the NFL to find day one starters, which isn't necessarily true every year. There's usually a couple of teams where they're drafting guys who are going to maybe be starters 2 years from now that are maybe going to be more depth pieces or situational type players, or they're drafting guys and having to give up a quality starter, so they're maybe taking a step back to hopefully take 2 steps forward. There's a lot of good teams in this draft that aren't going to have to do that. I think Dallas is really one of them. Cyrus Torrence might drop right into their laps, make that first round pick very easy to make. Michael Mayer might drop and make that first round pick really easy to make. One of the corners like Keely Ringo could be sitting there in the first round, making this a really easy pick for them. Or you can just trade back. You could trade back, get more picks, and really thrive on that day 2, early day 3, and pick up guys that you can plug in as starters immediately. I think Dallas is in a great position to do that. And there's no need for them to do anything Jerry Jones-esque, I guess, and that is, trade up for a receiver, or trade up, draft Bijan Robinson, especially if you're bringing back Tony Pollard. Like, there's no point in doing that. You kind of want Jerry Jones to be a little bit more level-headed going into this draft, and they can make a real strong impact if he does that. And there it is. My prediction video for the offseason for the Dallas Cowboys. Make sure to thumbs up this video if you haven't already, comment if you haven't already, and subscribe, of course, if you haven't already, so you don't miss any of the future videos or any of the current videos that I have posted of this offseason prediction series. You made it this far, you might as well do all those things. And I thank you for coming, and I hopefully will see you next time with the next video.